Welcome. I'm going to guess this is Renata. I actually don't know your phone number, but I know you often call in if you can't make it. So maybe it's you, maybe not. If it's not Renata, you are also welcome. We are going to go ahead and get started. Yeah, I have some exciting stuff planned. I hinted in the email that I was going to go into some strategic goal setting, but I don't think we're going to have time for that. So we're going to focus primarily on um, selecting recipes. I'm kind of building off last month's call when we talked about creating a curriculum and what goes into that. So I am going to rehash that just very briefly and go into the actual recipe selection and everything that goes into that decision-making process. Because I think sometimes we have recipes in mind and we build the class off of that. But I do want to challenge folks to think of it a little bit backwards, and that way we're putting our strengths, our audience's needs, and our desired outcomes first, and then kind of going from there. So, welcome everyone to the February Infuse call. I am your host, Melanya. Wow, I feel so cheesy saying that. Melanya. And if you've been here before or not, just go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat. And I was going to ask everyone to put, what is your favorite thing to teach? Just very simple. What's one of the things you look forward to the most? Your favorite topic? It could be a technique. It could be a little nugget of information, uh, whatever it is we would like to know. And just for anyone new on the call today or watching the replay, I just want to say welcome and that you're in the right place. This is an open community of practice for anyone wanting to learn more about culinary medicine. If you don't know where to start or you're feeling overwhelmed, this is a good place for that. Even if you've already started and you have a fully fleshed out program, this is also great for fine tuning or enhancing or expanding your program or practice. And perhaps you have been handed a program or a new position was created for you and you're looking for some more guidance on what to do with that. This is also a good place for you. And even if you've been doing this or you're new, no matter where you are on that starting line, if you just want to feel more confident in yourself as a culinary medicine facilitator, that's really the end goal of a lot of the content we talk about on these calls. Is facilitation, leadership, and building that confidence and professional identity as clinicians, integrating this into our practice. So, oops, a little bit about me. If you don't know me already, I'll kind of be brief because I've had talked about myself at length. I've been practicing culinary medicine for about 12 years now, and most notably led the creation of the world's largest teaching kitchen program and a single integrated healthcare system in the world. I've served hundreds of thousands of people through this program in my own practice, tens of thousands of people, and helped many, many culinary medicine programs get started directly and just through my efforts of providing education and accessibility to this kind of information. And I've personally supported over 500 dietitians in starting or enhancing their culinary medicine practice. So I do feel passionately about dietitians in particular, being a dietitian in this space, but I do recognize that this is an interdisciplinary space, and I want to help all clinicians do this. Um, I became a dietitian because I thought more people needed to know and have the tools to kind of take charge of their own health and wellness. It didn't even occur to me that this was its own defined profession until I got to I didn't like know a dietitian existed until I even got to college. And then I discovered it. I originally was pre-vet and then food science. And then this wonderful career just popped up. And I feel like I really made it into what I wanted it to. And that's one of my favorite things about dietetics, quite frankly, is it's so adaptable. You can practice dietetics in so many different ways and so many different areas and sectors of not just health, but really the world. Um, and that's kind of led me to here. And to me, food and nutrition have always gone hand in hand. There's really no separating the culinary practice with the nutrition side of things. To me, that is just how we interact with food. in this world. So it always kind of made sense, and I'm hoping to help it make sense to more people. And I think a lot of us here listening to this in culinary medicine feel that way too, right? So it's about collectively getting this information, getting these resources out to more people so we can do more of this. And honestly, that's a big part of my goal. I'm here to share my insights and expertise, guidance, perspective on the facilitation and leadership of culinary medicine in practice. There's lots of wonderful people out there doing the research, but the application is valuable too. And that is where I excel. I am all in the doing. I'm happy to study and read and listen and hear and learn, but all of that is wonderful, but it doesn't make any change happen unless we put it into play. And that's what I'm here to encourage people to do that. Truly, it's my dream to see interactive nutrition education become the standard of care and accessible to all people. And it's my mission to help all clinicians and nutrition professionals around the world integrate culinary medicine into their practice. That's my big pie in the sky goal. So, without further ado, let's kind of get into today's topic here. It's going to be talking about recipe selection, and there's quite a lot that goes into it. If you haven't given it that much thought before, you're about to give it a lot of thought. So, my question for you, and you can sit with this, but I would really love it if you popped it in the chat. Nobody's popped in the chat yet, so we got to get that warmed up. What do you factor in when choosing your recipes for your classes? I'm curious, what is like some of your big decision makers here? What do you build that around, right? What do you think of first when you're like, okay, I have a new class coming up next week or next month. What am I going to teach? What recipes will I use? What goes into that decision-making process for you? Because that's really what it is today. And that's what we're going to talk about is the decision-making process of choosing your recipes. And just a reminder, we kind of talked about this. I can't spell, just fair disclaimer. But recipes are a tool that we wield as culinary medicine facilitators in order to guide our participants towards a desired outcome. We want to remember the point and the purpose and the place of a recipe. It is definitely a big part of what we do, but the recipe itself isn't the end all be all. It's kind of just the practical, tangible tool that we use to convey this journey and this experience to people. Um, so it's worth it to choose wisely. This is going to mean different things to different people. It can guide people in a wonderful or a not so wonderful direction. It can help people click with your content a little bit, or it can overwhelm and scare them sometimes. So there is a lot that the recipe itself imparts. Maybe, kind of thinking of it as subtext or reading between the lines. And we're not even going to get into recipe writing itself today. That's a whole nother topic. We'll probably do that a little bit later in the spring. But this is just choosing recipes. And you can use this to, guide creation of recipes too, if you would like, if you feel called to do that yourself. But there's many, many, many recipes out there that are wonderful and we can already take and use. So that's part of what we're going to kind of focus on today. So I'm going to do a quick recap from the end of our session last month, just talking about building curriculum, just so we kind of know the context for what we're doing here. Then we'll go into how to choose a recipe, fitting the recipe to your physical resources. I find this often comes first for folks, but I like to put it a little later down in that totem pole of selection criteria. Then using and adapting recipes. This will be more like the logistics and legalities and talking about making it different enough so it's not copyright infringement. And then before we go, well, we always want to cross-check this with our end goal and our outcome just to make sure it aligns because that is what's driving this experience for people. Okay, so just a quick recap from last week. This was kind of the culmination of things, of building your curriculum with a simple framework. We always want to start with the big idea and the learning intention, right? Is there a theme to this class? And ultimately, what will your participants gain from this? What will they walk away with at? What's your outcome, essentially, right? Do you want them to have more awareness, more knowledge, more confidence, more clarity? a higher skill set. What is that end goal? And don't feel like you need to pick a lot of them. Actually, one is best. Keeping it simple and straightforward will keep that learning pathway cleared for them so they don't feel as overwhelmed. Something we need to remember as practitioners here is that it might look simple to us on the surface, but we have the experience, right? This is a very new concept for a lot of people. Maybe they haven't cooked all by themselves before. Maybe they've only watched people cook. And as adults, it is scary to learn a new skill and practice something we're not good at in front of our peers. That is actually very terrifying for a lot of people. So just kind of remember that as we're putting this together. Part of this is creating a very approachable experience for folks, right? Low barrier. We don't want to intimidate them with the recipes. We don't want to intimidate them with our curriculum. We want them to feel comfortable trying new things, very open, exploratory, and simple. Simple is better, right? Don't take for granted what you know, right? Kind of try to teach to that baseline of pretending they know nothing. And then you can, of course, adapt as you go along once you learn what they know, so to speak. So identify that intention, build in a key skill or a takeaway from the session. Think of the kitchen application here, and then build in a reflection or an integration moment. This is really just your engagement or interaction. So it just as an example of this, right? Building balanced meals without perfection might be your theme, right? The name of your class or the title, so to speak. And my end goal here is to help people reduce decision fatigue around deciding how to build that balanced meal, make it a little less intimidating for them. So they do it more often and they don't get hung up on it being the perfect balance. So I'm going to teach my main skill here, not my recipe, but the skill I want to teach is flexible plate building, um, and showing them different ways to put that balanced plate together. I'm going to use a technique of one base, three variations, so variations on a theme of doing this, right? So maybe we start with chicken, green beans, and brown rice. And we talk about three different ways to reuse those ingredients to build the balanced plate in different ways. Maybe one would be tacos, maybe one would be a curry, maybe one would be a stir fry, maybe one is just simple grilled chicken and then rice and green beans, right? It doesn't have to be too complex. But that's what I'm going to be teaching today. And I will pick my recipes based on that overall intention of reducing the decision fatigue. Um, and then I'll build in a reflection question or two. I don't pregame these. I like to be more off the cuff for my own practice, and just kind of read the room and ask questions that way. But if you want to have something prepared for yourself ahead of time, please do so if that makes you feel more comfortable and you have something ready to go. So maybe something like what felt easier about this today, or how do you see this? One of my favorite ones is challenging them to think about how they're going to use this at home. So how do you see yourself using this in your own kitchen? Will you do anything with this later this week or next week? Now, and that gives me a little bit feedback too on how my content is hitting with people. And this isn't even about the recipes. I want to point that out. I have not even selected a recipe for this yet. This is just my curriculum framework. The recipes come next based on what I want to convey and the experience I want people to have in class. Okay, so choosing a recipe, the big question. I've kind of split this up into conceptual factors and physical factors, so to speak. So physical factors would be like, do I have an oven, or do I even have a teaching kitchen? Is this an online class? Is this a demo? Things like that. The format, your physical resources there. But we're going to get to that. That actually comes second. I prefer to choose the recipe based on audience needs, your strengths as a facilitator, and the desired outcome. Those big three things, right? And we've talked a lot about this. If you've been following along in the Infuse calls or watching the replays, I talk about this like quite a lot. Is, we really want to get to know what our audience needs and wants and their own capacity for things so we can make it appropriate and relevant to them. right? Just because this is a good thing to teach and talk about doesn't mean it's going to fit what our audience needs and is ready for. So that audience needs part, really getting to know your participants, where they're coming from, what level they're at, meeting them where they are. That's incredibly important to choosing your recipes. So is knowing your own strengths, right? If, I don't have experience cooking any type of Asian cuisine, I'm probably not going to select a recipe in that realm, right? I'm going to stick with things I am more comfortable with. And here's the thing, and I've talked about this a lot too, is we don't all have to do the same things, and you don't have to be good at everything. As long as you know what you are good at, just capitalize on that, right? Maybe I'm just a whiz with a knife and I have mad knife skills. So I'm going to really focus on things that have knife skills, and I'm going to teach other people this level of skill and comfort and confidence wielding a knife in the kitchen, and all the cool things they can do with it. So just as examples, work in your strengths. You're marrying those two things. And then the third piece of this is that desired outcome, right? At the end of the day, what are both of these things driving towards? What do I want them to walk away with? Um, what is the outcome for the class? And if you are more research oriented, this is a great opportunity to measure that. You can measure it with qualitative data. You could send a survey. You could do, a 6 month or 1 year check-in with folks. You can set that up however you like. But even just in real time, you're going to get some really good process improvement data just by asking things in class and observing what your participants do from beginning to the end. Yeah. Something I'm going to say here might rattle some folks, but I think we all know this actually to a degree, is not all recipes are good recipes. It might have started out with a really great idea, that recipe writing is its own skill. It's actually kind of an art form too, I would even say. And what it really is, it's a translation of concept into um, practical use, right? So just because someone has a really great idea and they're able to pull it off themselves does not mean they can communicate it very well to others. And that's what the recipe is. It's a communication tool at the end of the day. So I've seen it a lot where the recipe concept and the picture looks beautiful, and then the directions are all kinds of confusing. And I even know what I'm doing, right? So I imagine someone who isn't as confident or experienced in the kitchen looking at this recipe. Good Lord, no wonder they're intimidated by cooking, because it just leads you down a path of potential not success, right? It creates a lot more anxiety than there even needs to be. Um, and again, remember, people in your classes are often doing this for the first time under the pressure of, being judged or watched by their peers. Even if you're creating a safe space, that's a fear and insecurity within a lot of people, right? We, as human beings, we have an ultimate drive to feel a sense of belonging. And that affects how we act and what we're willing to try in front of people, especially people new to us. Sometimes can be even worse. Um, but just remember that, and remember that your recipe is a tool for them, and you want it to be clear, easy to understand, simple, and lead them from point A to point B, right? Lead them down the path. And this is your opportunity to control that journey a little bit, right? If we have a really well-written recipe, we are already eliminating instances where they might fail or have an oopsie, right? That's what the directions are. If we have a really solid directions, we're going to steer them in the right direction, right? Um, but if we have poorly written directions, they're more likely to experience failure or what they perceive as failure, right? They're going to have unexpected outcomes. They're going to have things that they don't know what to do with that happen. And we can avoid a lot of that just in writing or having really well written directions. Um, so apparently you can see I feel passionately about this, but it just kills me when I see like a recipe that it could be. I'm like, oh, that's a wonderful idea. And actually for a lot of it, I just take it and kind of rework it into my own. And I'll talk about that a little bit later anyway. But suffice it to say, choose a really well-written recipe or write it yourself if you feel confident in that skill set. And a good test I find is to have someone who doesn't cook at all read through it and see if it makes sense. I use my partner for this. Um, and it really gives me insights into any gaps I might have missed when I wrote the recipe itself. Um, and remember that the simplicity and clarity of the recipe doesn't have to be big, long, all of the cool, fancy things. Simplicity and clarity wins because when it's direct, simple, easy to execute, that's when we, as the cooks, have fun. We can relax because we trust that the recipe is guiding us in the right direction. And then we have a successful experience. We get positive feedback. Everybody is happy, happy, joy, joy. It's a wonderful time, right? And that's ultimately what we want to do here. Like we've talked about, we want to create an experience for people so they feel comfortable and more confident doing this at home. And if we have a positive, relaxed, and fun experience, they're more likely to replicate that, right? If they don't have success executing their recipe, they're probably not going to try that again. They might not even try cooking again, you know? So this is an opportunity for us. Yeah. So there, like I said, there's lots of really good written recipes out there too. So just keep that in mind when you're choosing something. Um, really choose from that tried and true source. There's a few recipe libraries out there that you can check out. I know the Teaching Kitchen Collaborative has one. The VA recipe library is public domain. I wrote a lot of them, and my colleagues in the VA wrote a lot of them too. And I reviewed pretty much everything in there. So they're good. I can vouch for them. Go ahead and pull from them, use them. And if you want kind of a hands-on tangible guide, we feature our featured resource for this quarter, Mix It Up, is a really wonderful jumping off point too. Uh, all right. So now that we've thought about these conceptual pieces, right, our audience needs, our strengths, and our end goal here, then we consider the physical bounds of what we're doing. And I really like to do it this way because I find if we do it the other way around, if we start with our physical space first in the logistics, we will often limit ourselves. We will already discount things that we don't perceive as being feasible simply because maybe we don't have that tool. When in reality, a lot of recipes are very adaptable. If you don't have a blender, a lot of times you can just chop it by hand or a food processor, I should say. It might have a slightly different texture, but you could still make guacamole without a blender, right? It's just chunky guacamole. So don't I just find it just kind of we pre-bias and limit ourselves if we just fit it to our physical bounds first before considering that conceptual framework. And you'd be surprised at some of my favorite really good ideas came out of me doing it with this method of thinking the conceptual first and then fitting it to my physical bounds. And I wouldn't have even come up with some of my favorite recipes if I had done it the other way around. So it really kind of pushes your creativity as a facilitator here. So just keep that in mind with the conceptual. Once you have that down, then start thinking of what are my limitations from a physical standpoint. Maybe I want to do a baked chicken dish, but I don't have an oven. But maybe I could do it in a Dutch oven on the stovetop. Maybe instead I could do a pan-fried chicken. Maybe I could even do a grilled chicken if it's nice weather and I have a grill. Maybe I have a grill. Maybe I have a tabletop grill or a griddle, right? There's a lot of different ways to get a similar outcome. And this also, I love it too, because it's a really nice illustration point for your audience. People also get railroaded into certain appliances within their own kitchen. And if they feel like they can't do that one thing and they feel like they can't cook, which is not true. They're just not skillful at using that one thing. So I see people, I can't cook just because they've not had success using the stove, but maybe they can cook things like a whiz in the microwave. Maybe they use their oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank. The little oven. What's it called? I totally forgot. Not an Instapot, but the little tabletop convection ovens. Someone help me, please. Good Lord. Well, it's a little tabletop convection oven. Um, I just can't think of the commercial name right now. And they're great at that. That somehow is easy for them to use. And so use that. You know, if there's any way you can get this information ahead of time, that could be part of your audience needs that you adapt to. But even if it's not, work it in and point that out about it. Say, you know, this was originally an oven recipe, but I adapted it to be um I'm still trying to think of that appliance. Someone please put it in the chat. Do you know what I'm talking about? They're very popular right now. And sorry guys, not the Ninja, like it's just a tiny oven that sits on a tiny convection oven. Sorry. I'm really trying to think of what this is. It's amazing what my brain can't move past sometimes. Um, anyway, I will force it to move on. Consideration of your resources and logistics, right? In terms of, is this going to be a demo? Is this going to be a hands-on? Is this your kitchen and you're teaching virtually? Is this a commercial kitchen, right? So if it's a if it's a kitchen you're familiar with and you already know the resources, you can kind of factor that in. But I find keeping things, if you want just a kind of a quick tip, non-cooks. Oh, a toaster oven. That's close. It's like the modern version of it is a toaster oven, Dory. You're right. But there's like a specific brand name I'm blanking on. It effectively is a toaster oven. It's just called something different. Maybe I had a dream about it. Maybe this doesn't actually exist. Um, Wonder Oven. No. It's I cannot remember it. Thank you for helping. Like people like it because it cooks things without added fat. That's their whole platform. And now I can't remember what it is, but it really is just an oven. It's just a tiny oven that sits on there. And Instapot is what's sticking in my brain, and that's the pot. I know it's not the pot, the pressure cooker. Anyway, um, air fryer. Thank you. That's it. Oh my goodness. Thank you guys. I appreciate you. That is what my brain was hung up on. The air fryer, right? Um, but my point is, right, they might not feel like they're comfortable with a regular oven or a stove, but they can use an air fryer like nobody's business. So using things like that is perfectly fine, right? Maybe the kitchen I'm using doesn't have an oven, but I have an air fryer and I just bring that from home. And that way I'm not limited in what I choose from a recipe perspective. And really anything you can do in the oven, you can also do an air fryer, maybe just a smaller portion. So maybe I'll just cut my recipe in half or quarters, right? Um, so again, thank you everybody so much. I feel so so much relief from that. Um, Again, though, once you have your audience needs, your strengths, your outcome, then fit it to your space, right? That way you aren't limiting yourself. And what I was going to say right before everybody shared that the air fryer was the thing I was trying to get to. Um, is that I find some really flexible recipes are often stovetop because most kitchens will have a stovetop. That is a pretty standard piece of equipment. So if you're using someone else's kitchen or even your own kitchen at home, that's a very easy guarantee. Also, if you want to have a show on the road, so to speak, you can buy a plug-in burner, and that way you can set up a kitchen, a kind of a pop-up kitchen wherever. So I often do err towards stovetop. The other big reason for this is it works really well for both hands-on and demo because it's very visual and interactive. Oven recipes are not. Right? We prep it, and then once it's in the oven, there's nothing to do. What are you just gonna do? Watch the oven for 30 minutes? So it's not as engaging. So I really enjoy stovetop recipes because there's something to do the whole time. You're either stirring, you're adding things, people see the steam. It's just a very engaging, interactive. You get a lot more smells and aromatics that way too. That is kind of I don't want to say fail safe, but is definitely one of my go-tos. And then my other one would just be things that don't need any heat or cooking appliance. So like a salsa or a spread or a salad, a chopped salad of some sort where I don't need anything to cook, very adaptable to a variety of situations. And it can even be a semi-cooked salad. Those are nice things to have too. I could talk all day about what different types of salads would be, but um, maybe we're chopping some things and then we just roast things lightly or pan fry some things lightly or even just toast some nuts to put on top. So there's different ways you can still use your elements, but have some kind of safe bases to jump forward from. Yeah. And again, a lot of this just comes down to pushing yourself to be a little creative. And I find some of our best ideas come to us that way. All right, using and adapting recipes. This is one I do get questions about quite a lot because there's, we want to be mindful of things, and a lot of us come from uh, maybe a more clinical or a more educational background where we're very mindful of plagiarism and giving credit where credit is due and citations and things like that. So very fair, right? We definitely want to approach this with ethics in mind. Um, Generally speaking, though, a lot of recipes are pretty fair game. Educational use is generally considered safe from copyright infringement. It's commercial use that gets us in more of a sticky place where we do want to have express permission. So if we're just using this in a class for an educational purpose, we are not claiming credit and we are not gaining anything from the use of this from a commercial standpoint. Then we can use people's recipes if they've been published, right? So if you can use them from a cookbook, you can use them from a recipe blog, you can use them from open source, public sources, like I mentioned, those couple before, the VA recipe library. Mix It Up also has an online source. If you buy their book, they have a little QR code in there, and then you have online recipes you can print and share handouts with folks. Um, so it's generally considered safe from copyright infringement for the educational purpose. Now, if you put this as the gray area here is if you promote the recipe itself. That can sometimes be construed as commercial use. So if you're posting the recipe, even though it's someone else's, if you're posting it on your social media, perhaps, or without giving credit, right? Or without asking permission to do so. That's when we might get a little sticky. If it's used for educational purposes, generally speaking, you're still going to be fine. The person often won't do much and it's kind of an acceptable practice. But that's where I would be a little more careful and maybe get permission ahead of time before doing that, right? Or if you're posting the recipe on your website, it's one thing to reference something like, say, here's a collection of, we do this all the time, you see it all the time, 10 great chicken recipes, and then you link to other people's content, right? You're not appropriating it, which is the big idea. You're giving them credit, you're linking to their thing. So that would be fine, but don't take ownership of something that's not yours, pretty much. And then as long as it's in the educational realm, not the promotion and commercial realm, you're good to go. And again, if you can give credit to the creator, always do so when you're using their content, especially if it's just you haven't changed a thing. Now, excuse me. Recipes are kind of like, I like to think of it like musical compositions, right? Because they are a composition. There are certain things that you just can't copyright. Like you can't copyright the C note. And similarly, you can't copyright a list of ingredients or an express direct action. Like preheat the oven to 350 is not a copyrightable thing. It's considered just factual. So nobody can own that information. So we actually do have quite a lot of use we can get out of recipes because of that. And it's actually quite easy to create your own original recipe because of that. What really is protected from a copyright standpoint is the directions, the way they're written. So that's a big piece of it. And like I mentioned before, that's kind of the skill set and the art to it as well. The exact ingredients. So if you have like quarter cup of rice and half a cup of garlic, well, that's a lot of garlic, half a teaspoon of garlic, like and you're a precise sequence, like the order the ingredients are in, the amount of ingredients, the descriptor for the ingredients, those are more copyrightable, not the base ingredients. So the rule of thumb, the best practice here is change three things, really. So you could change an ingredient, you could change an amount of an ingredient, you could change the order of things, and that would count as enough degree of change for it now to be considered your original or creation and not a copyright infringement of theirs. So that's what we're looking for. It is also a best practice to rewrite the directions, quite frankly, because that's where a lot of the copyrighted content is protected, right? Not the factual stuff, but the way they describe things is what comes into play. So if you say preheat the oven to 350 and then place your pan over medium high heat and add the garlic and the rice and gently stir for about 5 minutes or until you smell the garlic. That description of the action is the copyrighted material. I hope this is making sense. So I will usually change a few ingredients around. I don't really fuss too much about getting the three. I find it quite easy to get three. I quite often do more than three changes to make it my own. And then I will rewrite the directions myself. So they are original. They are in my own voice. And I am describing the things and not using the other person's description at all. I do that as just kind of a fail safe. So it is truly original content coming from me. Um, and then if you feel called to do so, and I kind of gauge this depending on how much the recipe resembles the original inspiration, but you can always say adapted from blah, 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 or inspired by blah, 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 and still give credit to the original author. I find if it was just a simple inspiration, I don't often give those kudos, but again, I kind of gauge it depending on how similar is this, right? If I'm really drawing a lot of inspiration, like this was a truly novel idea, I had never seen this combo before, yeah, I'm gonna give you credit. That's really cool, but if it's just another lasagna recipe and there's a million lasagna recipes, maybe not. Unless it's someone famous, maybe I'll give them credit because that's cool for them. But again, gauge it to what you feel comfortable doing. That part is not required. It's more of a courtesy. And again, I find that if it's pretty similar, it's a nice thing to do. But if it's very different, maybe I just, saw someone say spinach and artichoke lasagna, and I just took the concept spinach and artichoke and put it into something else entirely. I might really not say inspired by if it's not related. Maybe I make a spinach and artichoke, um, I don't know, bagel or something. And it was just a little bit of like, oh, those two foods in combination, that was my inspiration. I didn't really go into the weeds on the recipe. So in that case, it's far enough removed. I don't really feel like it's relevant to give that inspiration credit. But if I'm going to make another form of lasagna or maybe even a pasta dish, I probably will say inspired by or adapted from. I hope that clears some things up. Like I said, I've gotten some questions about this. They always come up, and it's really not that hard to one, take someone's recipe and just use it for educational purposes. You can just do that right away. You don't have to make those changes as long as you're giving credit and it's for educational, not promotion. And then the other piece is if you do want to make it more original and adapt it, change those three things and rewrite the directions a bit. That's it. It is pretty straightforward and simple, which is nice. And again, I think of this like music, right? How many different cover bands do we have, right? How, we hear similar chord progressions in many, many different pieces. You can't copyright every little bit of it, but it's the end, like it's the sequence and combination and that totality of it that is the copyrighted content. So if we're changing just a few things, now it's a different piece of content. Yeah. And if anyone has questions about this, you're always welcome to shoot me a message. But there's no questions in the chat, so I feel like I did a decent job explaining that. Okay. And I hope this gives you some maybe relief and some freedom in using the recipes that are out there that are already well written. I tell this to a lot of people is don't reinvent the wheel if you don't have to. I don't really listen to it myself, but sometimes I do. But culinary medicine has been around long enough now, even though it is still newer, that there is really good content out there. It wasn't this way 10 years ago, right? I had a hand in creating that. Several other of my colleagues had a hand in creating these types of resources, but there are really good ones out there now. So there's no need to make new recipes yourself every single time, unless you really enjoy doing that. Maybe that is one of your strengths and you feel called to do so. If that's the case, please go forth. More power to you. I really feel like recipes are infinite. There are infinite combinations of foods and ingredients and techniques, and it's just amazing to me. even now, I'm like, how could I possibly come up with something else? Sometimes I still do. Um, so if that's something that brings you joy and you like to express yourself in that way, please write your own recipes. That's wonderful. But if you don't feel like you have to. There's a lot of good ones out there, reliable, well written, that will guide your participants on the right path here. Um, so as we're kind of wrapping up here with our recipe selection, just because we've gone through this whole gambit. Oh, I just like bumped my microphone. This whole gambit of oh, I forgot my train of thought there. Oh, selecting our recipes, considering all these different factors, we always want to go back to the beginning of what's the outcome. We talked a lot about this. I drove this point home last month is you're taking them from point A to point B. What is that point B? What do we want them to have at the end? And just double check to make sure your recipes illustrate that. There are more than one ways to get there. That's a big thing to remember, right? There's not going to be one recipe to rule them all that is better than the rest. There's multiple ways to get to this end goal, and that's okay. That's great. That's part of the beauty and adaptability of this, and that gives us the wiggle room to tailor it to our audience, to our strengths, you know. So just as long as it gets you there and it illustrates that, you're good. It's just a quick check. And I would say depth is better than breadth. That's another piece. And this kind of goes back to we don't have to throw the kitchen sink at them, right? We want to keep it focused, direct. There's a lot of things we want to teach them and we want them to experience, but we don't have to do it all at once. They're going to have an easier time and be less overwhelmed if we pace them a bit, right? And go deeper into concepts instead of trying to hit multiple more concepts kind of thing. So don't put everything you want to cover into these recipes and content, but stick with what participants will be able to do, what they'll feel, what they'll understand, practice, appreciate, or walk away with, right? That's our outcome. Something simple. And the ultimate question I like is, will they be able to replicate this at home? And for this question, I really try to put myself in their shoes as much as possible. I know we all have some inherent bias, but as much as we can, try to think and visualize what your clients or your patients or your participants are going through and what their life might be like. Um, and ask that question. Is this something they could reasonably do at home? What barriers exist? And if there are some barriers I can identify beforehand, I'm going to take care of them before I teach that class or address them in class, right? If it's something I just need to mention or talk about. And that's it. That gets you there. So I hope you enjoyed this exploration of factors when choosing and adapting recipes for your curriculum. Oh, and just one thing to mention too before I go through with my take-home missions here is that you can always change it. Just your curriculum stays the same, but you can swap out the recipes if you want to, right? Something I will say, and those of you who have been doing this for a while know what I mean. You have some really amazing recipes, but they do get old after like the 20th time or the 50th time, even though they're really lovely. So it's okay to change it up and swap things out. You could do a seasonal rotation, which I really like to do, just to keep, an extra little element in there. So there's some natural variety, but also just makes sense. And that could be another talking point if I want it to be. Um, yeah, you're not stuck with just the first thing you choose. You can always change it up the next time you do that class. Yeah. And our take-home message, you don't have to teach everything all at once. And start with your conceptual framework, your audience needs, your strengths, desired outcomes. There you go. Choose reliable, well-written recipes. It makes such a world of difference, even to us who are experienced practitioners and already kind of know what we're doing, or at least we think we do. Makes a difference. All right. So I have some fun quotes from Julia Child today. I thought that might be pretty fitting for our topic. Try new recipes, learn from your mistakes, be fearless, and above all, have fun. I love it. She knew what she was doing. And then just another one because I thought it was really funny and supported my little well-written recipe quip here. A cookbook is only as good as its poorest recipe. Julia knew what she was doing. We could all take some wisdom from Julia here. All right, guys. The moment is here for our quarterly drawing, and my assistant is in the background here, and she's put everybody's names into a little spinny wheel who is on the call today, but also folks who attended in, what is it, February, January, and December. So all three months there. Oh, screen sharing has malfunctioned, but our winner will be Jessica B. Jessica, congratulations. I don't know if she's on the call today, but congrats, Jessica. We will reach out to her and get her information. Yeah, so that is our winner. Hooray! Hooray for Jessica. All right. And just, I don't know if Jessica's watching the replay or not, but if she happens to have a copy of this already, I'll work with her and get her something else. Or she could have a duplicate copy and give it to a colleague. That's also a really nice gift for someone. But thank you for that, Rowena. Sorry about the screen sharing, guys. But that is our winner. Yay, Jessica. I should have like a little fireworks emoji thing. I'm sure there is one in here. Thank you everyone for your participation. We're going to have another one in May. And again, I'll announce that next month what that what that resource will be for us. Okay. All right. If you're not aware already, or you're interested in going a little bit further with this and having some more one-on-one support and guidance, I am excited to announce that we will be launching a revamp of the 2026 Culinary Medicine Mastermind kicking off in April. So that's actually going to come out next month in March. I will announce it again on this call, but I'll also be doing so in email. And within this container, it's a 4-month container, so it's a shorter runway than the previous mastermind. I found that was a little bit too high of a commitment for people. You're going to get a one-on-one onboarding call. So I get to know you, your program, what your goals are, what you're looking for out of this. And that way I can structure the mastermind around that. You'll get a teaching kitchen audit and a launch tracker. So you'll have kind of a clear roadmap and guidance that you can, kind of just check off as you go or write in what's happening. To guide your experience. We'll have bi-weekly mastermind calls, so you'll get a lot of opportunity for one-on-one support to workshop things, brainstorm, overcome barriers, get actual resources to implement. So maybe you just need a survey. I can give you a survey to go ahead and put into play, things like that. And then we will include a live hands-on facilitation workshop. Previously, this was going to be an in-person event. Due to the nature of reducing costs for people, though, this is just going to be a virtual event, but it will be live and it will be an all-day, maybe an all-weekend thing where people will take turns participating. I have some fun stuff lined up for this. And because it's not an in-person event, the participants in the mastermind will be getting sent I don't know what to call it, but a box of goodies, so to speak, to help facilitate this experience. So things that will be used for teaching a virtual class, and I'll have a form that people fill out so I kind of know what their needs are. But you will be getting some tools there so to make your culinary medicine practice just a little bit easier and smoother for you. So if this is at all interesting to you and you want to kind of go to the next step with me, I encourage you to scan this QR code and get on the hype list. So I would love to see you there. And that's it for today. Our next call will not be the third Tuesday. It'll be the fourth Tuesday. It'll be March 24th at 11 a.m. And thank you all for being here today. And I'll send out emails about our next Q&A call as well, and the time change here on our March 24th call, excuse me. So yeah, thanks for joining me. I had a great time. I hope you did too. And I'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.